You've probably never heard of Harrisfield, Illinois, and that's not your fault. Even on its best day, the town barely registered a population of 12,000, a handful of diners, a high school football team that hadn't won state since 1983, and a town square with more pigeons than people. But something happened there in 2018 that made Harrisfield one of the most unusual places in the United States. Something. Digital.it started on a Tuesday. Ordinary, gray-skied, just like any other. But by mid-morning, every teenager in Harrisfield noticed the same thing: they couldn't get on Instagram, then Facebook wouldn't load. WhatsApp glitched. Not just for one or two users for everyone. At first, people assumed it was their phones. Or their Wi-Fi. AT&T was flooded with complaints. Then local businesses realized their Facebook pages were inaccessible. A cafe couldn't run its online promo. A gym couldn't message members. The public library's social media page vanished. By Wednesday morning, it wasn't a theory anymore. The entire town had been digitally cut off. Now, to be clear, Harrisfield wasn't offline. They had the internet. They could visit websites, shop on Amazon, stream Netflix. But anything owned by Meta, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp simply didn't work. Accounts failed to load. New ones wouldn't register. Even VPNs didn't help. A few tech-savvy high schoolers tried masking their location with foreign IPs. Didn't work. One even drove 20 miles to a gas station in the next town, logged in just fine, then returned home and was instantly logged out again. That IT was like crossing an invisible wall. Within days, people joked about it, calling it the Meta bubble. Some thought it was a hilarious glitch. Others weren't laughing. The local news ran a story about a small business losing customers after its Instagram shop vanished. A teenager cried on camera, saying she felt like the town had fallen off the map. And it had. In a way, national journalists got wind of the story. A Vice article called Harrisfield, the town Meta forgot. Then a tech blog published a piece suggesting it might be a geofencing accident, a configuration error that limited Meta access in certain regions. The official explanation from Meta? Silence, not a word. No acknowledgement. Not even a generic statement, and that's when people started asking the real question: what if this wasn't an accident? It took almost a year before the real story started to leak. The first clue came from an anonymous Reddit post supposedly from a former Meta employee. It got taken down within an hour. But not before someone screenshotted it. The post read, "Harrisfield isn't a glitch. It's an internal red zone. Classified as a PSR site personal sensitivity restriction. There's a specific directive tied to an individual executive." Nobody knew what to make of that. Conspiracy? Disgruntled ex-employee? Internet noise? Then, in 2020, an internal memo was leaked to a small European tech watchdog site. It wasn't supposed to mean anything to Americans. But one paragraph, buried in legal jargon, made a quiet reference to non-disclosure enforcement areas within U.S. jurisdictions where platform visibility is intentionally deprecated due to psychological harm assessments by senior leadership. Even that might have gone unnoticed if not for one word. Harrisfield. By 2021, the town had become something of a digital ghost story. People online speculated about what happened. Was it a data breach? A lawsuit? A mistake Meta didn't want to admit? Then, finally, someone came forward. His name wasn't public. Just a code name, Brent L. He claimed to be a mid-level policy analyst at Meta, and he shared a sanitized version of a document titled, Emotional Risk Protocol, Harrisfield Exception. It was dated February 2018. And on the third page, under the section marked, Executive Trigger, was this sentence: action initiated following unauthorized resurfacing of archived personal correspondence implicating immediate family member in adolescent mental health incident with media volatility potential. It sounded like gibberish. Until someone remembered a strange viral post from the previous year, late 2017. A teenager in Harrisfield named Caleb Wright had uploaded a screenshot of an old email. The post didn't stay up long, but it caught fire. It referenced a private conversation between two high school girls, and in one of those names, buried in the chain, was a surname that stood out, Zuckerberg, not Mark, but Randy. His sister, the post didn't say much. Just that the email mentioned a falling out at a private school years ago. A drama that ended tragically when a classmate took her own life. The email was old, cryptic, and vague. But enough for the internet to start connecting dots, and it hit a nerve. According to Brent L., Mark Zuckerberg was shown the post that same night. He was at home. It was late. And when he saw the screen, he didn't speak for 5 minutes. One of the senior execs described what happened next as a psychological episode. Mark demanded the post be taken down. It was. But the story didn't stop there. He asked a question that, by itself, wouldn't have mattered: can we make it so this kind of thing never happens again? But in a company like Meta, questions like that aren't always rhetorical. By March 2018, a directive had been drafted. It wasn't called censorship. It wasn't even called ABAN. It was filed under a new classification, geo-emotional containment. In plain English, the town was put under lockdown. A digital 1.0 Meta platforms. No new accounts from local IPs. No recovery for existing ones. All flagged content geo-suppressed. The internal document even included a clause stating that restoration of service is contingent upon emotional risk reassessment at executive discretion. And then, as these things go, everyone forgot, except the people in Harrisfield.at. First, people thought it would pass. That one morning they'd wake up and Facebook would load again, like a power outage finally fixed. But weeks turned into months. Birthdays came and went without tags or posts. Local events were barely seen beyond county lines. For a town that had once used Facebook for everything from garage sales to Sunday service invites, the silence was louder than it seemed. Some tried to adapt. Businesses moved to Twitter, but reach dropped. Teens abandoned Instagram for TikTok, though even TikTok's algorithm seemed oddly sluggish around Harrisfield. Rumors began to swirl, strange ones. That Meta had blacklisted the town for testing. That it was being used as a live experiment in digital deprivation. That somewhere in California, a CEO had typed one angry sentence, and a switch had been flipped. By the end of 2019, the mood changed. What was once confusion had turned into something closer to resentment. The town council tried writing to Meta. No answer. A local teacher named Susan DeHart published a Medium article, "What Happens When Your Town is Erased Online?" It went viral outside Harrisfield, but, ironically, no one inside the town could share it through the platforms it talked about. Then came the flyers, printed on cheap white paper, folded in half, and slid into mailboxes overnight. No logo. No signature. Just a message: you've been silenced. Not for what you did, but for what you reminded him of. Beneath that, a symbol. A stylized eye, half shut, drawn in code binary numbers spiraling inward like an iris. That was the first public trace of them. They called themselves Oblivion Bridge. No one knew who they were. Not at first. But within days, they had a website, basic, untraceable, and it displayed one page only, a countdown, ticking down from 30 days. Underneath, 5 words: "We found what they hid." The town buzzed. Not loudly, not online, but in whispers and texts and handwritten notes passed at the diner. Even the sheriff was asked about it at a town hall. He just shook his head and said, "Don't poke ghosts you don't understand." But people were already watching the clock, and on the 30th day, right as the countdown hit 0, the page changed. It showed a PDF. A scanned internal document, real, raw, watermarked, Meta internal use only. The file was titled, Directive 3C, Harrisfield User Flow Suspension Emotional Disruption Tier Red. No one could believe it. Some thought it was fake. But the document was thorough. Precise. It named the town. It detailed the protocol. It referenced a digital containment boundary, and more than once, it mentioned one name, Mark Zuckerberg. But what caught everyone off guard wasn't just the signature at the bottom, approved by executive override. It was a single line, Highlighted in yellow, this directive serves as a response to personal psychological harm experienced by senior leadership as a direct result of content virality tied to RZ. Randy Zuckerberg. That's when it clicked for everyone. The teenagers post the letter, the old private school story that went viral for barely 48 hours. The reason no one could speak of it again. Not online. Not anywhere. Oblivion Bridge didn't stop there. Over the next week, they released 6 more files. Internal emails. Meeting notes. Even screenshots of platform logs showing geo-locked content suppression for Harris Field users. No one at Meta responded. No denial. No press release. Nothing, but outside, the world was beginning to notice. On Reddit, the story blew up again, this time backed by documents. Journalists in Europe picked it up. Tech watchdogs in Canada called it a case study in unchecked digital authority. But still, Meta said nothing. They seemed to be betting on the same thing that had worked before: silence, except now, Harris Field wasn't the only one talking. It didn't take long before Harris Field stopped being a curiosity and became a headline. The blockaded town. Meta's silent punishment. One post, one CEO, one digital blacklist. News anchors debated ethics. Tech experts called it unprecedented. A few influencers even tried filming dramatic YouTube videos just outside the town line, as if stepping into a forbidden zone. Most of them didn't make it past a gas station before turning back, but inside Harris Field, the energy was different. What had once felt like helpless isolation now hardened into something else: quiet determination. In living rooms and church basements, people began meeting. Teachers. Store owners. Retired IT guys. They weren't looking for revenge. Just an answer, and maybe an apology. They formed a group. Not a protest mob, but something calmer. Smarter. The Harris Field Coalition for Digital Rights. No slogans, no yelling. Just documentation, thousands of screenshots, timelines, testimonies. They reached out to digital rights groups. At first, only a few responded. Then came a breakthrough. A small non-profit law firm out of Portland offered to take their case pro bono. The goal wasn't to sue for money. It was to be acknowledged. By spring of 2024, the legal groundwork had been laid. The lawsuit was titled simply, Harris Field v. Meta Platforms, Incorporated. The claim: unlawful digital discrimination. Emotional negligence. Abuse of platform dominance. Meta didn't respond publicly. Their lawyers filed a quiet motion to dismiss, citing national security exemptions tied to executive emotional distress protections. That only made things worse, because by then, the case had hit the front page of the New York Times. When the court date was announced, June 4, 2025, the entire town gathered outside the local courthouse. Not because the trial was being held there, it wasn't, but because they needed to watch it together. Someone had set up a projector on the town square. Old wooden benches were dragged out. Kids sat cross-legged on the ground. The local librarian passed around cookies. It felt less like a protest and more like a neighborhood picnic, except every person there knew they were making history, and then the feed started. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. Just lawyers. Screens. And one crucial moment, because during the testimony phase, Oblivion Bridge did something no one expected. They played audio, not of a whistleblower. Not of some dramatic call. But of a Meta executive, heavily redacted, voice-disguised, reading a direct quote from an internal message board. The quote was short. Just 12 words. Mark said it, "I don't want to see that town again." Silence fell over the square. That was the moment the legal team pivoted. No more arguing about technicalities. No more second-hand memos. This was intent. Personal. Unambiguous. Harris Field wasn't collateral damage. It was a decision, and now it was a trial. By the end of that week, public support had exploded. Civil liberties groups released joint statements. Celebrities tweeted about Harris Field. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Harrisfield and hashtag Unblock the Town started trending. Even a former Facebook executive unnamed but credible gave an interview to NPR confirming that geo-emotional containment was a real protocol. Meta, under pressure, released a vague statement: "We continuously evaluate platform integrity and community standards with sensitivity to user experience." No mention of the town. No apology, but people weren't buying it anymore. Inside Harrisfield, something had shifted for good. Kids who had grown up without Facebook suddenly saw the world noticing them. Business owners who had nearly closed their shops felt their customers return not digitally, but physically. Strangers drove from other towns just to visit. To say, "We heard what happened. We're with you." And yet, the town didn't gloat. No one printed t-shirts. No one danced on Meta's name. They were waiting for one thing to be heard. The courtroom was quiet when the judge leaned toward the microphone. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiffs, residents of Harrisfield." No gasp. No cheer. Just stillness, like the town was too stunned to believe it was June 19, 2025. 7 years and 3 months since the block began. The lawsuit hadn't been about damages. No one wanted a payout. What the residents asked for clearly, consistently, was accountability. And now the court had delivered it. The ruling cited unjustified suppression of access to public digital infrastructure, abuse of dominant platform authority, and most significantly, emotional harm caused by arbitrary, undisclosed executive action. But the real headline came at the end of the decision. The court orders Meta Platforms Incorporated to issue a formal public apology to the residents of Harrisfield, Illinois. Said apology must be delivered by the company's chief executive officer, in a live-streamed public statement, within 14 days of this ruling. 14 days. One camera. And Mark Zuckerberg himself, for years, he'd been able to stay behind glass statements, memos, carefully polished interviews. But now the court had turned the glass into a mirror. And the whole world would be watching. The broadcast was scheduled for 8 p.m. Eastern, a Tuesday night. Meta's official channels announced it simply: statement regarding Harrisfield. No other info. No graphics. Just white text on a black screen. But people knew. Every major network carried it live. Newsrooms called it historic. Commentators argued about whether it would be genuine or hollow. In Harrisfield, the square filled again. Same projector. Same benches. But this time, there was a different energy. No more wondering. No more waiting. Just, breath held. The screen lit up, and there he was. No virtual background. No corporate banner. Just Mark Zuckerberg, seated behind a bare desk, staring into the camera. He didn't blink for the first 3 seconds. He looked tired, but not from lack of sleep. It was the tiredness of someone who'd run out of explanations. He began quietly, "My name is Mark Zuckerberg. I'm the CEO of Meta. And tonight, I want to speak directly to the residents of Harrisfield." A pause. Then he continued, 7 years ago, after an internal review of a piece of viral content that surfaced involving my family, I made a decision. A private one. I requested a temporary limitation on our platform's services in a specific location. That location was Harrisfield. He didn't defend it. I believed, at the time, that it was a minor action. A technical boundary. I underestimated what it would mean to the people who lived there. I didn't intend to harm anyone. But intent doesn't change the outcome. No cue cards. No visible teleprompter. Just words that felt like they had been rehearsed 1,000 times in silence. What I failed to understand, what we as a company failed to recognize, is that digital spaces are no longer optional. When we block access, we block participation. When we silence one town, we tell its people they don't matter. He looked straight into the camera. To the people of Harrisfield, I am sorry. There it was. No metaphor. No passive voice. Not regret, or incident, or misunderstanding. Just, I am sorry. He continued. You were not part of any mistake. You didn't break our rules. You didn't threaten our systems. What you shared was difficult, yes. But difficulty is not a reason for erasure. Not in a company that claims to build connection. His voice dropped slightly. I know this apology cannot restore what was taken. 7 years of silence. 7 years of watching the world move while you were digitally paused. That's a weight I cannot lift with words. But I offer them anyway, because it's what I owe you. He paused again, then added something no one expected. This will not be the last time I make a mistake. But it will be the last time I try to bury it in silence. And then, just before the feed ended, I have instructed our teams to permanently remove any protocol allowing individual or emotional discretion over platform access. That was my decision. It ends with me. The screen faded to black. Back in the square, the crowd didn't erupt. They didn't clap or shout. They just stood there, quietly, as if letting the words settle. One man, an older veteran who'd fought for phone service during the town's darkest months, just nodded once and whispered, "That'll do." A teenager who hadn't been able to create a Facebook account her whole life suddenly felt like she existed in the same country as everyone else. A local coffee shop, once shut down by the lack of online exposure, now had a line out the door the next morning, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. It wasn't planned. It wasn't symbolic. It was just 9 p.m. but it felt like the end of something. That same night, as the apology was clipped, shared, and memed across the internet, a new video quietly appeared on the Oblivion Bridge website. Just a black screen and a sentence typed in white, "We're done here. But remember, every system has a back door. And every ghost town remembers who made it one." They were gone the next morning. In the end, Harris Field didn't become a tourist destination. No museum, no HBO special. The town returned to itself, peaceful, slow, intact. But if you ask anyone who lives there what changed, they won't mention the lawsuit or the cameras or even the apology. They'll say something simpler: we were seen. And that, for them, was everything.